Welcome back to the channel, my friends. Warhammer Man Studios, I'm Warhammer Man, and today we're taking a look at the Emergency Balance Update. This video is sponsored by the Game Bunker. More on that later. Warhammer 40,000 Balance Update, Knights and Death Guard. There are thousands of Warhammer events being held around the world every year, and this produces a huge amount of data for the Warhammer studio about the games and how they're being played. The rules teams in the studio are then able to make changes to improve the playing experience for Warhammer 40,000 players everywhere, whether they're battling out in the grand tournament or across the mate's kitchen table. We know that when a certain army is a little too powerful and overbearing, they can become prevalent in casual pickup games too. So when an issue arises, we aim to fix it as soon as possible to improve things for everyone, whether your battlefield is an event, a club, a store, or home. In the last few weeks, it has become apparent that three factions, Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights, and Death Guard, are having a run of the field. Updates for these factions were originally scheduled for next month's Balanced Data Slate. However, the release of Codex Leagues of Okon and its points update gave us an opportunity to address these now, ensuring a return to a more harmonious match play experience right away. Of course, there will be usual updates for other factions next month. Targeted changes. The primary challenge is the points across the Knights codexes went just a little too low on average, enabling too many large Knights and vehicle chassis to be present on the battlefield. This creates a punishing experience if you aren't explicitly building your army to deal with that many lethal threats and high toughness and wounds. As a result, we've changed the points of bigger Chaos and Imperial Knights by between 15 and 30 points each to bring the total number of big Knights down. The Cerastus and Questoris Knights have gone up by between 30 and 40 points, with Canis Rex receiving a 35-point increase. The Warborn Stalker enhancement has been raised by 15 points. Similarly, we felt the current cost of the Death Guard combined with their toughness and damage output has allowed too many units onto the tabletop lately. We've tweaked the cost of various units and characters to counterbalance that. The Biologist Putrefier, Death Shroud Terminators, Feated Bloodthrone, Foul Blightspawn, Lord of Virulence, Meiotic Blighthaulers, Plagueburst Scrawlers, Poxwalker, Tallyman, and Typhons have all increased by between 5 and 20 points. By making these smaller increases across the breadth of units in a codex, it will reduce the number of units in a typical Death Guard army by 1 or 2 in the size of games you normally see at tournaments. This will bring them more into line with the rest of the field without overly down-tuning any single unit and causing too harmful an impact to the average Death Guard player. Alright, so I think overall these changes are probably about what should be done. I think realistically they're probably going to go a little bit too hard on Chaos Knights as they reflect Imperial Knights. But there definitely need to be some changes because Chaos Knights definitely should not be able to take 6 big Knights. Imperial Knights definitely should not be able to take like 4 big Knights and then 3 little Knights, including Canis Rex. And of course Death Guard, I think overall needed some changes, and I think this probably addresses it. I think part of what's problematic about Death Guard is some of their actual rules, but I think the points changes can make up for that. So let's jump over here and take a look. Alright, so we're over on the Munitorum Field Manual. First we have the Codex Chaos Knights. So Knight Abominant went up by 30 points, Knight Desecrator 30 points, Knight Despoiler 40 points, Knight Rampager 30 points, Knight Ruinator 25 points, and Knight Tyrant 15 points. So all of the big Knights went up by 15 to 40 points. I think this is probably a bit much. The Ruinator was already a little bit overpriced to begin with. Not a big difference on the Tyrant, but I think realistically this is probably in line with what you should see. Part of my problem, or what I think is going to be an issue, is if they essentially just did like blanket nerfs across the Chaos and Imperial Knights. Imperial Knights are just substantially better. Their army rule and detachment rule are like exponentially better than that of the Chaos Knights. The Feel and Pain on a 6-up and then the rerolls are just absolutely amazing, and there's nothing in the Chaos Knights Codex that's even close to that. But I think overall these are probably about what the changes needed to be. There may need some like slight tweaks to make things actually usable, but overall I think this is what they needed. And then for the smaller Knights, so we have the War Dog Carnivore has went up to 150 points. I definitely think this is unnecessary. I mean, the Carnivores were really good, but now that means that a Carnivore is more expensive than they were pre-Codex, and they are substantially worse. I think the Carnivore was probably fine at 140. You can only take 3 of them in an army, or 6 if you play the Armiger Specific Detachment. And the Armiger Specific Detachment really wasn't all that good to begin with. But I think essentially now if you were taking 6 of them in the Armiger Specific Detachment, your army going up by 60 points, not going to really break the game. So overall, good changes. And then moving over to the forgeworld stuff, we see the Acheron up by 30 points, the Atropos up by 40 points, Castigator up by 30 points, Lancer up by 30 points, Megara up by 30 points, and Styrax up by 30 points. All those probably in line with what you should see. The Atropos is substantially better than all the other Knights in my opinion. So I would have rathered see like him go up by 50 points and maybe the other Knights go up by 20. So we see like more diversity in what Knights people are taking, not just overall nerfing them. And then for the Lords of Dread, we see the Warborn Stalker has went up by 15 points. So now instead of 10 points, it's 25 points. I think that's fine. It's a very powerful stratagem. So overall, I think good changes, probably a little bit heavy-handed in a couple of places. But part of the problem with Chaos Knights or Imperial Knights being like unbalanced is they just can become extremely overwhelming and just create a bad play experience for like other people. And I would rather the game be overall balanced and everyone have a good time. So good changes overall. Now a quick word from today's sponsor, Game Bunker. Game Bunker carries a full range of Games Workshop products, including miniatures, terrain, paint, tools, and more. Game Bunker offers 15% off MSRP for most Games Workshop products with the discount code WHMS. Receive free shipping in the continental United States on orders over $145. Online orders ship out within 24 hours. Game Bunker is a veteran-owned business. Use affiliate link below, enter discount code WHMS to save 15% on most items at checkout. For fast, friendly service with a discount on your favorite tabletop wargaming purchases, visit GameBunker.net and let them know that Warhammer Man sent you. Alright, and then next we have Death Guard. So Biologist Putrefier, 15 points. Death Shroud Terminators, 20 points for 3 or 6. Foated Bloat Drone, 10 points. Foated Bloat Drone with the Blight Launcher, 20 points. Foul Blight Spawn, 15 points. Myotic Blight Hauler, 10 points. Plagueburst Crawler, 15 points. Poxwalker, 10-man unit, 5 points. Talaman, 10 points. Typhus, 10 points. And then for Mortarian's Hammer, we see the Tenderless Emissions, 10 points. Then we also have Lord of Contagion, 10 points, and Lord of Virulence, 10 points. So I do like that they spread out the points increases over like all of the stuff that people are taking. That's going to make it so like none of your units are just completely unfieldable, or you can't just drop one specific unit that got nerfed hard and just take something else, as all of the Death Guard stuff is really good. But I think realistically this is probably going to be the difference between like 120 to like 200 points in your Death Guard army, which is like one powerful unit or like a couple of smaller units. So probably good changes. This should really help. The 6-inch deep strike and charge is still a bit problematic for some lists. And then also the Lord of Contagion just being absolutely amazing and still only 120 points. Probably should have gone up by more than 10, especially when people are taking like 3 consistently in an army. And I think part of the problem with some of the changes for the Death Guard army is that you're just going to take like one less unit that's not that important, or maybe 2. And then still take all of the stuff that's just absolutely amazing. So probably a little bit light on the Death Guard here. Alright, and then moving over to Imperial Knights and finishing up with them. So we see the Halvren has gone up by 10 points. The Warglaive has stayed the same. I think probably the Warglaive should have went up by 10 points too, as the Warglaive is arguably as good or better than the Halvren. Also with the rerolls and then the Feel No Pain, these dudes are absolutely amazing. So very interesting to see that they didn't go up at all. And then moving over to the big knights, we see Canis Rex has gone up by 35 points, Knight Castellan by 15, Crusader by 30, Errant by 30, Gallant by 30, Paladin by 30, Preceptor by 30, Valiant by 15, and then Warden by 20. So Canis Rex was obviously massively undercosted, so this is probably a good change here. 35 points is probably a little bit on the relaxed side, but overall I think this will make the effect that they want. I think most big knights armies were taking 4 big knights, including Canis Rex. So you're looking at about a 125 point increase to the army. So realistically, they're probably getting like 1 less armiger or like 1 less immolator. Not sure this is going to completely change the game, as overall the army rule and detachment rule are what the issue is, as they are super strong. But having to deal with like 1 less vehicle will definitely help your opponents. I just don't know if it's going to be the difference between knights winning all their games and losing them. And then moving over to forgeworld, we have the Acheron, 30 points, the Atropos 40 points, the Castigator 30 points, the Lancer 30 points, the Megara 30 points, and the Styrex 30 points. So again, I think the Atropos is by far the best, and then probably the Lancer after that. And I think the Atropos at 405 is still just ridiculously cheap. So I think overall this is going to help a little bit, but realistically it's not going to be enough of a difference to make the changes at like the lower and medium tables. I think the only difference here is that at a highly competitive level, that extra vehicle, whether it's a knight or an immolator, could make the difference between like 2 really good players winning or losing. But I think for like your low and medium tables, I really don't think this is going to make a difference. I think most people that were struggling into knights are going to continue struggling into knights and probably feel like they are overpowered. I think bare minimum, Games Workshop should have also updated the rules and just made it so you can either reroll 1 hit roll or 1 wound roll per activation. Not let you have 1 hit roll and 1 wound roll, as that is just absolutely oppressive because it increases their efficiency massively, especially on knights that shoot and fight. You're potentially getting like 1 hit roll and 1 wound roll in the shooting phase, then 1 in the combat phase, and then again in your opponent's turn in the combat phase. So you're realistically getting like somewhere around like 6+ rerolls per turn. And then with knights like the Crusader, where you get 1 reroll per phase on top of that, you're getting those same 6 rerolls in shooting, combat, And then you're also potentially rerolling one save for Overwatch in the movement phase, then an additional reroll in the shooting phase, an additional reroll in the combat phase, an additional reroll in your opponent's shooting phase, and then an additional reroll in your opponent's combat phase. So you're talking about like somewhere on average of like 10 plus rerolls per battle round, which is just absolutely insane. But keep in mind also that the Imperial Knights are still using their index. We don't know what's coming with the codex and when the codex is coming. It's obviously had some issues and it's overdue, but it should be coming around pretty soon. So hopefully these are just to kind of hold you over until the codex hits. And then realistically, the codex is probably going to split up some of the army and faction rules to where the knights just aren't quite as oppressive. So let me know what you think of the changes. Have you been struggling into Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights, or Death Guard? Do you think these changes are going to be enough? Would you have rather seen some more like targeted changes that address like some of the knights that are specifically the issues or some of the units that are specifically the issues? Or do you like the overall just blanket changes that just make the army a little more expensive? Always like to hear back from you guys in the comments. And as always, special thanks to the Game Bunker for sponsoring the channel. Check out the link in the description to save 15% on most Games Workshop products with code WHMS at checkout. Warhammer Man Studios, I'm Warhammer Man, and I'm out of here.